Sonic Riders is a game that has been sitting in my head rent-free for about 6 months now. I first remember playing this game when I was around 5 or 6 years old, and although I had no idea what was going on like 90% of the time, I remember it being quite fun and fast-paced. Only now though, I finally decided to revisit the game, only to see that it has mixed reviews. But this just made me even more curious. I'm sure that we all know about Sonic's rocky history, but are the reviews for this game justified? Or was this game just not given the proper attention it deserved? Let's talk about Sonic Riders. Before we get into the game, I think it's important to talk briefly about the development and some context behind this game. For Sonic's 15-year anniversary, Sega wanted to do something big for the Blue Blur. They would release 4 games in that year, one of them being Sonic Riders, which came out on PS2, GameCube, Xbox, and PC. Something strange about this though is that Sonic Riders came out on February 21st. Meanwhile, the 3 other games released on November 14th. I just thought that was kind of interesting, to be honest. But this game is also special for another reason. This is Yuji Naka's last Sonic game. He was a senior developer that has been working on Sonic games from the very beginning. Although his behaviors and manners are quite questionable, he has a big influence on the Sonic franchise, for better and for worse. After leaving Sonic Team and Sega, he would eventually join Square Enix and release the masterpiece that is Balan Wonderworld. Anyway, without anything further to do, let's put the disc in. Wait. So my computer doesn't have Windows Vista or Windows 2000. So, for convenience sake, I am going to emulate the GameCube version. So right when you start the game, you get this cool anime cutscene, showing Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles racing against their rivals for the game, with epic music to boot, except for the weird thrusting sounds. They kind of put me off. This animation was made by Production IG Studio, which you may recognize today from their anime such as Haikyuu or Psycho Pass. I'd like to sing my praise with the art direction of this game too. The way they shaded the characters with those thick and evenly spaced out lines make them pop out with like this type of swag. It's very unique in my opinion, and I think it fits the game very well. Anyway, with that sick intro, let's create a save file and get right into it. At the top of the game select menu, you have the normal race mode. Here you can play each track individually, go for time trials, and play in races against other friends. Or just by yourself if you're me. You also have character select, but with half the characters missing as of now. And there are 5 tracks you can pick from too. But as we progress in the story mode, you will unlock more characters and stages. Speaking of which, story mode is the next option. When starting out, you only have one choice for the story mode, the hero's story. Sonic Riders' story structure reminds me of how Adventure 2's story was told, from the story being told from the perspective of the heroes and from the dark side. In this game though, you don't have the choice between the two, and you have to complete hero's story mode first to unlock the other. I don't really mind this though, as the developers clearly intended for you to play Sonic's story first, in both Sonic Riders and Sonic Adventure 2. The hero side starts with a CGI cutscene, with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles investigating in some sort of city, looking for a Chaos Emerald. Out of nowhere, and some random building in the distance, 2 randoms just jump out and smash the window, with the emerald the heroes were looking for. We don't know their names yet, but they're very clearly meant to be the opposites to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The heroes give chase, with Sonic using the hoverboard they took from one of the characters to try to catch up, but to no avail. While the green guy mocks Sonic for being slow, Sonic just sees this as new competition. Tails notices a strange symbol at the bottom side of the hoverboard that they took, but it's not yet clear what the symbol represents. Now look, I get it. It's Sonic's 15-year anniversary, and you've got to save some budget for the other games. But the fact that Jet and Sonic shared the same voice actor, Jason Griffith, just baffles me. And the way Jet talks too. It must have put a massive strain on Jason's throat. I feel really bad for him. Also, I swear Sonic's model is the same from those weird as hell videos from Futuristic Hub. If you don't know what that YouTube channel is, please, for your own sake, don't check them out. I know it sounds like I'm plugging them, but genuinely, don't check them out. Anyway, we suddenly jump cut to the next day. Eggman starts an intercom throughout the whole city that we don't know the name of, and announces his new Extreme Grand Prix, which he is hosting, where the contestants compete by racing with extreme gear. These races are special, as they will show you who's the fastest. Good writing! The entry fee is quite cheap, a Chaos Emerald. After announcing this, he ends the intercom. Yeah, this is totally a scam. I don't know why Sonic and friends simply ignore it. After all, there are only 7 Chaos Emeralds in the world. But I guess if they didn't listen, then there wouldn't be a story mode, so whatever. Eggman starts intercom back up because he forgot to reveal the current contestants. The 3 randoms from the cutscene 2 minutes ago turns out to be in this Grand Prix, but we still don't get their names though. And with those 2 cutscenes out of the way, you start the first race in Metal City, with a clear goal of finishing in the top 3. This is a fine introduction level for the game, if you know what you're getting yourself into, but that's for the gameplay section to talk about. After winning the race as Sonic in Metal City, we do a time and place skip, and they are in Splash Canyon now. You meet the 3 heroes talking about Dr. Eggman's plan, and are trying to figure out what he is planning. Amy just appears out of nowhere, and says that she signed up for the races to keep an eye on Sonic, and gives him a wink. This is a little bit disturbing to me. How is she able to blink when her eyes are connected? But before I give that too much thought, Tails comes in to save the day and starts talking about the symbol that he saw in the introduction cutscene and gives us some lore. This badge symbolizes the Babylon Rogues, a floating island where a bunch of thieves lived and thrived. The gods of the worlds were like, nah, you guys are bad, and hid the island into the depths of the earth, where their treasure still remains. Tails also mentions that the rogues were extreme gear specialists. Extreme gears are the hoverboards which we use in the game. This conversation eventually derails and Tails starts talking about the theory and physics behind how the hoverboards work, and Knuckles goes haywire with information overload. Knuckles is saved by the purple random we encountered in the beginning cutscene. She checks out and later disses Tails' custom-built hoverboard and goes on with her day. She also calls him Shorty, which I wouldn't really call that a diss, but sure I guess. Also in this cutscene, nobody is behind her when she's looking at the board, but in the next shot, Amy, Sonic, and Knuckles are behind her somehow. Anyway, her comments make Tails insecure about his engineering skills, I suppose. I love this shot that pans from Amy to Knuckles. It just looks very funny to me. I don't know why. Okay, so some of you may be confused on why I've called her the purple random, and that's because the story mode hasn't told me who any of these characters are. In fact, Storm's and Wave's names are never mentioned in the hero story. The only way you get to learn their names from the story mode is to read them yourselves after the races against them. From this point on, I'll just refer to their names at all times just for clarity's sake. So you race as Sonic in Metal City, then Tails in Splash Canyon. It makes sense I get to play as Knuckles now. And yes, you do. Knuckles bumps into Storm the Albatross, the guy whose hoverboard was taken. They get into a bit of a scrap, but instead of hitting each other, they just end up abusing one of the bystanders, this poor sentient AI. They want to settle the beef and decide to do so on the racing track, which Knuckles wins. After the race in Egg Factory, Sonic and crew are in Green Cave, practicing in the forest before the races in the semi-finals. Jet decides to step in and tries to intimidate Sonic, saying that to truly be the fastest on the hoverboard, one must become with the wind. Sonic doesn't seem to mind too much, but even more seeds of doubt are planting into Tails' head, and he starts to bash his own work by saying that Wave has a point, and that she is a skilled engineer. How do they know that she is a skilled engineer? I don't know. It wasn't established anywhere. For all they know, she could have been pretending the entire time, and just making fun of the hoverboard in an attempt to demoralize the crew, which I mean, to be fair, it did work. Anyway, Tails doubts himself for a little bit, but then becomes determined to prove them wrong, just like that. Then Tails races Wave, and eliminates her from the tournament. In the finals, only Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Jet remain, with the finals taking place in the sand ruins. A bit of trash talk between Sonic and Jet ensues, and then they begin the race. Sonic seems to be winning the race, but then Wave hits a switch, causing Sonic's board to blow up for Jet to win the race. Jet rubs it in Sonic's face, saying that he won, and that the dirt suits him. Wave booby-trapped the board like 4 races ago. I'm surprised that Tails hasn't done any maintenance on the board, especially since he vowed to Sonic that he will make the best hoverboard just 1 stage ago. Anyway, Jet wins the prize and then the Babylon Islands appear. Eggman takes the key Jet was holding and flies toward the treasure for himself. Sonic and crew give chase, where Sonic meets Jet again and calls Jet's name for the first time. Then they have a race in the Babylon Garden to settle their differences. Sonic wins this race and makes fun of what Jet said in the Green Cave. Sonic catches up to Eggman and stops his plan. Eggman held Amy as hostage, but Sonic didn't seem to really care and just sent them both up into space, or however high up they went. Sonic takes the key Eggman took and just gives it back to Jet. Jet starts talking about how he doesn't want Sonic's pity and to not play games with him, which I find kind of weird since 5 minutes ago he was making fun of Sonic for losing, despite Jet only winning because of Wave's trap, but whatever. Wave and Storm come up saying that Jet should just take the key because Sonic and his crew doesn't want it, and that's where the hero story ends. Not before Amy appears and gets mad at Sonic for sending her and Eggman up into the air. With the hero story being over, we unlock a bunch of new stuff, new characters to play, new maps, a brand new mission mode, and the Babylon story mode. Again, taking inspiration from Sonic Adventure 2. The Babylon story begins before the hero's side. The Babylon crew are chilling in a blimp, where Eggman comes in as a guest, telling them how they can get the treasure of the Babylon Garden. Spoiler alert, Eggman says the key to the Babylon treasure are the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Man, if Sonic's crew just didn't sign up for the Grand Prix, this plan would have failed miserably. Anyway, Jet and crew go to steal the Chaos Emerald, which is what happened at the beginning of the hero's story. After successfully escaping the police, the story jump cuts back to Splash Canyon. Wave sees Tails' hoverboard and is actually impressed by his skills as mechanic. If you remember the hero's story, Wave blows up Sonic's hoverboard. In this clip, she plants the bomb beneath the hoverboard. I have no clue how Sonic, Knuckles, or Amy didn't see this. They are literally right behind her, except for when she actually puts the explosive in, I guess. Since Storm was eliminated from the Grand Prix, from losing the race against Knuckles, he's sent over by Jet and Wave to sneak into Eggman's factory, find some information to see what Eggman is truly after. Also, by sneaking in, they mean to race with his robots. Why do I even bother questioning this? Whatever. While Storm is in the ice factory, Jet is chilling before the semifinals. Nothing of note happens really, so let's move on to the Grand Prix finals. Before Jet races in the finals against Sonic and his gang, Storm comes back with crucial data from Eggman's base. He took Eggman's secret diary, and in this diary, Eggman talks about how he fooled the Babylon crew, and that the key to the treasure aren't the Chaos Emeralds, but the weird cube thing that Jet had in the beginning. From this point onwards, the hero side and Babylon story match until after the final race. So we are back to present time, where Sonic gives the key back to Jet. Babylons open the door and enter inside, with them being introduced with a loud roar. This roar catches Sonic's attention, and he follows suit, entering through that door seconds before it closes shut. They are stuck in a weird abyss, where they come face to face with the Babylon Guardian. You defeat the boss, and then Sonic and Jet get the hidden Babylon treasure. Eggman also got into the abyss somehow, and he takes the treasure from Sonic and Jet, only for him to find out that it's just a carpet. Sonic and Jet laugh at him, and they become friends, and soon part ways. So here are my overall thoughts for the story. The story is quite stupid, to be honest, and because of that, some would say that it's not even necessary. But the fact that this game has a story mode in the first place is pretty cool nonetheless, especially since the racing games don't really have one. Even the most popular Sonic racing games, All-Star Racing and All-Star Racing Transformed, don't have a story mode. And Team Sonic Racing has like visual novel types of cutscenes instead of proper cutscenes like this. The story was never the main point of this game. This can especially be seen because it isn't even the first option in the menu. Like I said before, stories in kart races aren't really a thing, and it gives you a good excuse to play these levels and to play with other characters that you may have not been comfortable trying in the first place. I'd like to commend the story writers for taking inspiration from the Babylon Garden myth from real life. For those who don't know, the Babylon Gardens are said to be located in Iraq, and they are just floating islands like the ones you see in the game. As Iraq has a lot of desert, I found it to be a cool detail that the Grand Prix finals took place in a desert. To be honest, I don't really care that much about the story, but I do care enough to write 2,200 words describing it and giving it critiques. While this game was advertised as a direct competitor to Mario Kart, its gameplay is very different in regards with how depth it can be, and is different to many kart racers in general. You have to get a running start, but once the race starts, chaos ensues. Why can't I grind on these rails? Why is the drift so tight? What is that weird beeping noise? Why am I running instead of using the hoverboard? Pit stops? For what? What are these airstreams? Oh, I guess I'm just riding them now. Oh my goodness, I'm doing tricks in midair. Oh, I have to twist the analog stick now. There's a lot to digest here. And with no tutorial in the game to tell you how these mechanics work, it's all a bit overwhelming when starting out. I'll give you the rundown of the controls and different stats each rider has in Sonic Riders. Before we get onto the racetrack, you can choose between 3 different character types: speed, fly, and power. You can also choose different hoverboards that have different stats as well, which can be unlocked by either playing through the story mode, Babylon missions, or just buying them in the store with the rings you collect throughout your races. In the races, you go through each track 3 times. That's about where the similarities end for Sonic Riders and other traditional car racing games. Speed characters can grind on these rails, which you have to press the jump button twice to get onto, which is a little bit confusing, but whatever. With flying characters, you can jump off these special ramps, and you start to fly. The control scheme becomes inverted when in the air, which is not confusing at all. Power characters just smash through obstacles left in the stage. The easiest to use out of the 3 since you don't even have to press a button to punch anything. In the story mode, you're forced to use hoverboards, but you actually have more choice when you go for a normal or Grand Prix race. You have the roller skates, which are more beginner friendly, but the trade-off is that they're a bit slower. The hoverboard is the middle ground, and the motorbikes are the fastest, but use a lot more air to compensate. Some of these special boards also let you mix 2 character types together. For example, the magic carpet that you get from the story mode gives you flying abilities. Put it on a speed or power character, you can use those 2 styles together. This makes grinding for the Grand Prix trophy races much easier. You can also buy more hoverboard items with the rings you collected in the races within the shop. And these hoverboards also have little special features, which you can use to mix and match to make your perfect racer. Each character also has 4 different stats, which also determine how your character controls. From what I gather, the dash is for acceleration. The limit is at the top speed which you reach, and cornering is how well you turn. I'm still not quite sure what power is meant to do. I find the wording for all of these stats so misleading. Besides cornering, I thought that all the other stats meant something else. I thought that the dash meter meant how fast you can boost, for example. But I quickly realized that when I played with different characters, that wasn't the case. The game in general is pretty unclear with its mechanics. To even access the tutorial, you have to go into the extras menu and scroll down a bunch of other menus to get into it, where it just plays you a video explaining some of the mechanics. I still feel like this video isn't enough, and there is much more hidden depth to this game. People have done some data mining for it, and there are remnants of a playable tutorial left in the game files, which is just a shame, because I feel like more people would have given this game a chance if that were the case. Maybe it wouldn't have received such mid-review scores. I've mentioned the air mechanics, but I haven't properly explained them yet. The air is your fuel for the game, and everything you do consumes it. Holding a jump, drifting, and boosting takes up large portions of your air tank. You can replenish your air tank by using these character-specific tricks, ramps, and coins, like I mentioned earlier. and those are the fastest way to do so. But there are also scripted parts of the level where you can spin your analog stick to get more air. And there are air pit stops, which you want to avoid at all costs, since they stop you dead in the track, letting your opponent zoom past you. The best way to maintain your air tank is by riding other people's turbulence, where you can also do tricks, getting a large speed boost and filling up your tank even more. It allows you to catch up with the person in first place as well. Be careful with the turbulence though, as once you are inside it, I don't think there is a possible way to get out of it early, which can lead you down a path that you didn't want to go towards, which can be quite frustrating at times. Editor's note: I found out there is actually a way to leave the turbulence. Hit the brake button, but it feels a little bit clunky, and sometimes you just end up killing your speed and wasting more of your air. You have 3 levels of boosting, and you can reach level 2 at 30 rings and level 3 at 60. Not only do the rings extend your air tank, but they also upgrade your racer stats, which give you even better control of your character. The speed at which you go also increases, so it's important to get as many rings as early as possible. Thankfully, rings are scattered throughout all the stages, either in little item boxes or just laying about. The drifting also works very differently than in Mario Kart. In Mario Kart, the longer you drift, the stronger your speed boost is. In Sonic Riders though, you have a set speed boost, no matter how long you drift. In fact, the longer the drift, the more air you waste, so it's important to drift as little as possible while still drifting for long enough that you get the speed boost. As you can probably imagine, there's a lot of stuff to digest in this game, and this game makes zero effort in explaining any of it to the player. Just from the very beginning, you have no clue what to do. You just see a countdown and you're on your feet. The first time I played this game, I just ran straight into the electric fence and fried Sonic to death, because I tried to start the race early. This game makes no effort to tell you how to jump on the grind rail at all, besides from that tutorial hidden very, very far away. The game doesn't tell you how to drift at its first corner. The game doesn't tell you how to replenish your boost. The flying is especially confusing. What does this analog stick even mean? I had to Google to find out how to fly properly. The horror of it all. Yes, the horror. When this game came out in 2006, there weren't as many resources online as we have today. And many people didn't even have access to the internet, so they were left on their own. Besides the story mode, Sonic Racer also has 3 other game modes: the normal races, Babylon missions, and the mini games. Normal races are straightforward enough, unlike 99% of this game. You can race in time trials, in singular tracks, or in the Grand Prix mode. Getting the gold medals in both Grand Prix unlocks extra tracks of the game. Now, you can probably imagine how to get the gold medals, right? Just get first place in the Grand Prix. Well, you're wrong. You actually have to get first place in every single race. This forces you to learn all of the tracks with all their shortcuts, which is a bit of a shame, since you have to put in dozens of hours just to unlock these 2 stages. Even more so since these 2 tracks are easily some of the best in the game. I personally think that it should be a little bit easier to unlock them. These 2 stages aren't the only things you unlock though. You also get access to Jet's missions. Speaking of which, you also unlock missions for Wave and Storm after beating the story modes. These missions are just extra content where you do missions. Man, my writing for the script is worse than the story. You basically race through different stages with special objectives that you need to complete. For example, do a certain amount of tricks, collect literal junk, reach the goal in 60 seconds, grind on a rail. That's about it, and there are 100 missions for you to do. 40 for Storm and Wave each, with the last 20 going to Jet. They are a fun way to kill some time, and if you beat every mission, you unlock different characters from other Sega games, like Ai, Knights, and Ooh La La, with their respective extreme gear. And if you get a gold rating on every mission, you also unlock the green robot. Aside from the normal races and missions, you also have 2 minigames, Tag Mode and Survival Mode. Tag Mode is a 4-player minigame where you race in a 2v2 format, but the catch is that you share an air tank with your teammate, and if you get too far away from each other, you get shocked, which leaves your opponents a chance to catch up and overtake you. I imagine that this game mode could be a lot of fun with friends, since you have to communicate to make sure that you don't use up the air tank too quickly, and that you stay close together. Survival Mode is split up into 2 different categories, so I guess you can say there are 3 minigames. Survival Battle Mode is the only non-racing minigame in this game, and it kind of reminds me of the Mario Kart DS balloon minigames. Except this one is a lot less fun. Your speed is very limited. I would even say that your speed cap is halved, which just makes the movement feel very slow and clunky. The goal of this minigame is to basically crash into other people and take out their 3 stars, which act as lives in this case. You can collect shields to protect yourself from the attacks, but they basically just act as an extra 1-up, making the game drag on even longer than it should. In Racing Survival Mode, the players have to grab the Chaos Emerald and go through 5 hoops to win. You can steal the emerald by boosting into the person carrying it. It's a really straightforward minigame, and it's a fun way to kill an hour or 2 if you're bored. Right, let's talk about the tracks themselves. Metal City. This track is fairly wide and open, and feels alive as there's a lot of cars driving around in the level, with those being the only obstacles in this track. It's probably a great health and safety risk, especially when there is a Grand Prix going on. But whatever. I'm putting this track in B tier for now, and yes, that's right, I'm going to be doing a tier list for all the tracks in the game. Splash Canyon. In the story mode, you're playing as Tails for this race. This track has a mostly open structure to it, but it has a few narrow points like the cave towards the end of the lap. The paths you can take as Tails are also quite fun, as you get a perspective of the map while up in the sky. This level also forces you to drift a bit more, and in one part of the map, you can even fall off if you don't drift properly. I like how this track is more difficult, but it doesn't have a drastic difficulty spike. The music for this level isn't much to write home about. It's similar to the music in Metal City in the sense that it's not really memorable. It is a great song to listen to while drinking it out on the track. I will also put it in B tier. Egg Factory. This track is very narrow and tight, and not in a good way. This is the first real difficulty spike of the game in my opinion. If you weren't familiar with the drifting in this game, well, oh boy, you have no choice but to use it now. This track was designed for drifting. With this level being lava themed, sometimes Knuckles would just blend into the level for me if I wasn't focusing really hard on the screen. Overall, I think this track belongs in the C tier. Green Cave. This track just feels a bit disorienting at times for me, with the way the map is laid out with its multiple tiny branching paths, and when I was in the more open parts of the level, I still felt a bit disoriented. I'll have to put this in C tier as well. Sand Ruins. This is easily one of my favorite tracks in the game. From the first time you see the level, you can tell it's going to be a banger. I love how you start to race inside the Colosseum and race in the desert, only to go into the ancient Babylon island temples, and to get shot out of a bow to finish the lap. A cool thing about the bow as well, is that the faster you spin it, the further you get shot out. The soundtrack for this level also gets me pumped too. This is easily an S tier for me. Babylon Garden. The final track of the hero's story. I found this one to be slightly underwhelming, especially after having played Sand Ruins. But on its own accord, it is a challenging map, and if you weren't comfortable with drifting, then this map really forces you to get good with it, even more so than Egg Factory. Some of the turbulence that the CPUs left were really annoying, and they prevented me from taking the shortcuts I wanted to take frequently, specifically this rail grinding section here. But overall, I think this track belongs in the A tier. Now let's talk about the Babylon story tracks. A really neat feature of the Babylon story is that instead of repeating the same 6 stages from the hero stories, they created nighttime versions of them, with different paths and even different themes. Night Chase is the night version of Metal City. It's basically Metal City, but it has some weird clutter at the very beginning, and even more cards that you have to avoid and not bump into. But in general, I think this is just the worst version of Metal City. I'll have to put it in C tier. Red Canyon is the same as Splash Canyon for the most part. The only parts that stick out for me is that they remove the cave and instead you just spin in the wheel. I'm putting this map in the same tier as Splash Canyon. B tier. Ice Factory is the only level with ice physics. I like the aesthetics, but the ice physics are just annoying. You can't steer at all when you're on the ice, so you have to drift around them to have any sort of control. This just doesn't make any sense to me, since like, you know, hoverboards don't have wheels, so what is a hoverboard skidding on? Well, I suppose it makes sense for the roller skates and the motorcycles, but still. This leads you to having to monitor your air tank much more carefully, as this level already relies on the drift heavily. I'm just gonna put it in D tier. White Cave just feels like a generic track to me. It also feels quite lifeless, as there aren't any vibrant colors in the level, opting in for a more gray and monotone color palette. It also feels like you're just going down one tunnel for half of each lap. This track belongs in C tier. Dark Desert is another banger. You get to explore different parts of the desert, which lead to another entrance to the Babylonian Gardens, where you get to defy gravity and use your teleporters to get between different platforms. And when you leave the temple, you get put in a little town, where you can even race on the rooftops. Like I said, it's an absolute banger. S tier. Sky Road. What I said for the Babylon Gardens apply here. I like how with each lap, more of the track gets destroyed by the missiles. It's a pretty nice touch. But if you put Babylon Garden and Sky Road side by side, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Still, I'll put this in A tier. The Babylon Guardian. This track is the equivalent of the Baby Mario track in Mario Kart. The transition between virtual and the scary world is fun at least, but the stage is just very underwhelming. And the boss for it is ridiculously easy. Just hit the vase 3 times and you're done. There's no time limit or anything. D tier. Now, let's talk about the 3 extra stages. The Digital Dimension is just an extended version of the Babylon Guardian. I do like the theme of going through the door and entering Hell and Heaven, but I don't know, this track just feels very open and bland, and kind of uninspired for me. The shortcuts aren't even that much faster either. I think this belongs in C tier. Now, these next 2 tracks are partially the reason why this video came out later than I wanted to. Grinding for these levels by getting gold in both Grand Prix was a pain, but I'll take a look at these tracks for what they are, rather than what I had to do to unlock them. Sega Carnival. This level is a nod to all the Sega franchises, and it's a great pleasure to go through. I find you getting in a taxi to be a very creative part of the level too. I would give this track S tier, but the music constantly switching is very painful to the ears. So I'm still going to put it in S tier, because I don't have the heart in me to call this an S-. Sega Illusion is another great track, and it's pretty much the same as the Sega Carnival, but with the nighttime setting. I really do like the Challenge Space 5 building though. The music has the same problem, but still, easily in S tier. I've only spoken about a few songs from the soundtrack, but this is a Sonic game. The music is guaranteed to be good. I've been playing Sonic Riders music throughout the entire video, so if you enjoy the background music, then you'll enjoy listening to the music while actually playing Sonic Riders. A group of dedicated Sonic Riders fans have been developing a mod for this game to make it more competitively viable and for you to play the game online with friends or with other opponents. The racers in this game are really skilled. Just look at this footage I've been playing and compare it to the footage I've recorded. It's really impressive how these people are dedicated and have the discipline to get really good at a game like this. It's really entertaining to watch. This mod is called Sonic Riders Tournament Edition, and if you want to check it out, you can join our Discord. Sonic Riders is unlike any other kart game I've ever played, and I don't even know if I should call this a kart racer to begin with. All these differences is what makes Sonic Riders so much fun to play, but it never goes out of its way to explain anything. It is really easy to see why a lot of people were overwhelmed and confused, which can lead to a very frustrating experience. Which is just a shame. If Sonic Team just completed the playable tutorial or went out of their way to explain the mechanics a bit more clearly, I think the reviewers would have given this game a much better chance, since there are a lot of mechanics to this game, and it can feel really rewarding to play if you know the controls and track layouts. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. On the left, you will have my most recent video, for whenever that is uploaded, and on the right, you will see me talk about another Sega game, Yakuza 0. I read negative Steam reviews about the game, and I just give my opinions on them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Cheers!